And today on the show, I'm delighted to be joined by Keith Hartley. Keith is the CEO at LevaData, a leading strategic sourcing application for direct materials spend. Now, Keith and I have known each other for a number of years, and I think over the past 12 months or so, he's been busy combining his day job with writing a book. It's called Conquering the Decision Abyss, Turning Data into Action in the Modern Supply Chain. I got a chance to have a sneak peek at an early copy, so I invited Keith back onto the podcast to chat about the book writing journey, and then more importantly, some of the discoveries that Keith made along the way. So with that said, Keith, welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Phil. Great to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Likewise, I'm excited to talk about this. I know it's been something that you've been really passionate about for a long time, and finally kind of seeing it come to life.
Yes.
Now, before we start, just from a context perspective, the experience that you have is going to be really key to the conversation today. So I just wonder if you could share a little bit about your background.
Sure. I've spent my career over 25 years now in technology, in particular in global supply chains and in procurement positions and companies, everything from being hands-on in sales to being a part of the C-suite.
Yeah.
I do this journey working with software companies and being a board advisor for some and doing advising for others. I've landed at LevaData, where I'm CEO. And our focus at LevaData is to help companies make sense of the oceans and oceans of data that impact their supply chain and how they can make better decisions with that data. So, I kind of feel like my whole career trajectory has led me to this point, and it's a great time to play in supply chain and sourcing procurement.
Yeah, 100%. And of course, data being the foundation of everything that we do. And, a challenge that certainly in my 25 years in procurement supply chain, we've always been kind of seeking for, what's the solution to all of this data that's out there? How do we, ensure its accuracy? How do we use it? And how do we use it to make decisions? So you wrote a book, which is probably a bigger undertaking than maybe you thought when you started from the journey. What made you what were you so passionate about that you thought, you know what, I'm going to go and embark on this project?
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy endeavor. I hadn't attempted anything like this previously. Although I write weekly, usually on my Substack account, talking about different things and the goings on in sourcing and procurement. But after years of being at companies and advising and working alongside procurement supply chain professionals, I kept seeing the same types of struggle.
Yeah.
And I would put those into the bucket of data overwhelm and the ability to turn that data into meaningful action. And so as I do on so many things, I'm a reader. I like to read. I go to the bookstore. I order lots of books on Amazon. And I couldn't find anything that spoke about this data overwhelm and the insight to action loop that is not happening at company.
Yeah.
And so I felt it was almost necessary for someone to write a book almost urgently, shining a light on these challenges and hopefully coming up and using real world examples and offering kind of a pathway forward with some practical solutions. So it felt more like a culmination of a lot of my experience, decades of experience in supply chain, seeing the inefficiencies that go on at these companies. I started talking about things like the decision abyss several years ago. And I really wanted to punctuate this with a book that, gives some hope, I believe, to sourcing and procurement professionals and supply chain professionals as well.
How would you, before I kind of go into some of the questions, let's just kind of level set on language. We talked about the decision abyss. We've actually talked about the decision abyss before. What is the decision abyss?
Yeah, it's a fair question, especially since the book is conquering the decision abyss. The ironic thing is there are so many things we can do to improve it, but decision abyss is this chasm that forms between critical supply chain functions. So when you think about engineering, product design, sourcing and procurement, finance, operations, each operate typically with their own siloed data, the processes, and human behavior. And what happens is this leads to inefficient decision making. So, many times as organizations grow, organizations that make products, when they grow, the complexity is compounded. They have acquired assets, they've divested assets, and you get pockets of data cross company, cross region, cross function. With those pockets of data, each of these areas like product design versus sourcing, they operate with their own siloed data and processes and human behavior.
Yeah.
And so this causes a decision abyss to occur. And that's what keeps and prevents organizations from making kind of fast, cross-functional, well-informed, data-driven decisions. It's hard to act confident as the CEO of a company when a disruption strikes, when you have this decision abyss occurring. And this is not an uncommon problem for companies that care about supply chains. And I like to categorize those companies as, if you make a product, you have a supply chain. If you have a supply chain, you have this complexity at some varying degree of difficulty. And so the decision abyss is, over time, it's compounded with the proliferation of data, the siloed nature of organizations. I've been in meetings where product design says, based on our data, we should do this.
Yeah.
And sourcing says, no, we should do this. And supply chain planning says, no, we should do this. They're all right and yet all wrong, because none of them had that view of the entire picture to make the best, most informed decision. So this decision abyss is real.
Yeah. How do you find it? You gave kind of an example of kind of that cross-functional dysfunction sometimes in making decisions because of the decision abyss. How do you find it manifesting itself for manufacturing sourcing professionals?
Yeah, it's a mess. And so for manufacturers, for people who make products, this abyss creates confusion. It slows reaction times. It leaves teams operating, in some cases, very blind. It causes them to have delays in bringing products to market. It causes delays in updates to products, like going from version 15 to version 16. And really the underlying issue of the decision abyss is the proliferation of spreadsheets and ERP systems, which create an enormous amount of uncontextualized, disconnected data. And you're asking very smart, very driven people in the supply chain and sourcing world to make decisions with incomplete information and oftentimes under duress.
Yeah.
And so it's just an untenable situation. And the second part that I would say how this impacts manufacturers is we've normalized this pain. It has been around for 50 plus years, probably longer, but it's we've normalized the pain. So imagine going to a company and saying you can't have an ERP system, or you can't have a sales automation system, or you can't have an HR system. Well, us in direct material sourcing aren't given the adequate tools to make informed decisions with contextualized data. So for me, this is the purpose of the book is to kind of shine the light on the problem, to put some language around this problem and give people in the profession permission to have real conversations with their peers and with their leaders, because there is a better way to try to conquer this decision.
I feel from it's giving me flashbacks from my days in automotive procurement, where I think about, and really specifically in new product development, which I was involved in a lot. And procurement is often the last to find out, and I think for us as sourcing professionals within the manufacturing spaces, the impact just compounds. It compounds through, each kind of siloed function to the other, and it comes to procurement at the end, and procurement then has to do something with it. And you kind of often faced with a losing battle before you even start. And I'm sure you see that every day.
And I go out of my way to talk about how sourcing professionals are doing unbelievably creative and difficult work with inadequate tooling.
Yeah.
It's about time we had a conversation to help these product-based companies. And so it's easier to sort of look at an ERP system and say we need a general ledger and we millions of dollars to upgrade. But oftentimes those of us in sourcing and procurement we are left with inadequate tools like spreadsheet and email.
Yeah. Now we talked a little bit about we brought up sourcing there, but do you see it manifesting in other ways, like in inventory, for example, or just kind of the I don't want to say run of the mill, but just the day-to-day operational side of supply chain but the support from procurement of their supply chains.
Absolutely. So what I've really seen the last, I'll characterize it as the post-COVID era.
Mhm.
COVID, I love to say, is the greatest commercial for supply chain of all. People finally knew what supply chains were and are and how they impact our life. Since that time, you've seen this acknowledgement of how important data and this contextualized blended data is, and how difficult it is for companies to experience this. So I think about sourcing as becoming instrumental as the sort of swivel
Yeah.
between all things supply chain planning and all things product design.
Mhm.
So I'll give you an example. When you do new product introduction, engineers work in CAD systems and PLM systems, and you eventually have to get that bill of materials or bonds. You have to get it priced and built to order. So you have to go to sourcing to source those parts. When you're in supply chain planning, you oftentimes have a supply planner that worries about inventory and worrying about buying the next set of parts to make sure we have enough. But you have to go to sourcing to determine the risk attributes like lead times and years to end of life, and what alternate suppliers do we have, so I don't purchase these parts from China, but I buy them from Malaysia. These are all complex workflows, if you will, that are largely offline today. And by offline, I mean spreadsheet and email.
Right.
It's not a very efficient way to do it. So in the post-COVID era, you've seen this decision abyss exist where sourcing is sitting in the center and trying to serve not only product design and product engineering, but also trying to satisfy the supply chain planning and the supply management team, as they're called at larger companies. And so you see all of these teams with their own disparate data, their own disparate systems, their own disparate decision-making, and oftentimes sourcing is left with spreadsheet paralysis analysis. And again, they do some incredible work. I've seen things in spreadsheets I never thought I'd see.
Yeah.
It's incredible yeoman's work. But there's a better way for us in sourcing to work.
Do you see it's getting worse? Is that are we starting? And we'll talk a little bit in a moment about kind of how to start addressing the problem. But do you see that it's a problem that's becoming even bigger? With every year that passes for procurement supply chain professionals.
It's crazy. I mean, not only have decades of this kind of rapid, technology change, globalization, the data issue is sprawling and fragmented. It's getting worse. Each new software or reporting tool adds another layer and adds another isolation point. As a result, companies oftentimes get overpowered by data instead of empowered by it.
Yeah.
And the term that I use in the book, that I used to describe that, because when I started talking about the decision abyss, I really thought that was the underlying disease. Turns out that's just the symptom.
Yeah.
The decision abyss is the symptom of the real disease, which is the data gulch. The data gulch that forms under the proverbial waterline that causes all of this rapid confusion and impacts decision making. Because data is data. Companies and people and humans at companies have to make decisions. And when those decisions are delayed, when they're taken with all of the available information, you can get some real negative outcomes inside this data gulch.
Can you explain the data gulch a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. So at its highest level, it's what drives this decision abyss. It's siloed, fragmented, asymmetric information, and that fuels this suboptimal short-term decision making. So what that means for a manufacturer, if we make a product, we're missing savings opportunity. We're increasing our risk exposure. Every part, every ingredient, every metal that we buy becomes riskier. And ultimately, the big category for a C-suite executive is a loss of competitive advantage. So for me, companies are always firefighting rather than getting ahead of the problems, and they lose money when they don't see better options that are hidden in their own data or in the market.
Yeah.
So sourcing is so critical because companies can gain a competitive advantage with sourcing. So much of the procurement workflow, while it is vital to a company's operation, it is not as demonstrable of a differentiation as sourcing is. When you're sourcing the direct material, it has a direct EBITDA impact on the company. And so it's very exciting to kind of play in that space.
Yeah, and information that allows you to get up front in that process rather than be reactive, which is a space that I know that I always found myself in. Now, when I think about the data, is the problem led by there's just too much data, or the data that's out there is inaccurate? I can't trust the data, or it's just coming from so many different places. There's no way for me to connect it all together. Or is it all of the above? Like, what is it that's going into, like, there's data there and we know that's data there, but it's really hard to actually use that data in the decision-making process.
It's yes to all of it. But I'll go one step further, because the data problem, so the decision abyss is powered by the data gulch. And without giving too much of my book away, the main point is that it's a human behavior problem.
Right.
Because what happens is we fall into patterns, predictable patterns, easy patterns. And the thought of doing things differently is scary.
Yeah.
The thought of having ubiquity of information, of being exposed, of being replaced is scary. And so it's changing the human pattern of behavior that really is compounded.
Yeah.
There's companies that have been leading edge with this, who have made overtures toward understanding their decision abyss, still struggle because of the human element.
Yeah.
So there's a tremendous amount of retraining, relearning, and just acknowledging at a company that we want the same thing. We should all work together in the spirit of the company and try to make the best decision possible, period.
Right.
And when you get people involved, there are egos, there are ownership issues, there are, protect my turf issues. There's just a lot that goes into the human behavior inside of a manufacturing company. So a lot of work I do, not only with LevaData, but advising a lot of clients, is helping them understand that you have to get to that level of understanding the problem before you can begin to address this. And it's really, really hard. No surprise. It's really, really hard to do.
And does that require a cross-functional vision and strategy around? We recognize that that our ability to transcend the decision abyss comes from working together, but we need to do that, with a North Star and in a strategic way, as opposed to looking at everything that we do in isolation of our own functions.
Absolutely. It takes usually a very strong-willed change agent at the top. And that could be a CEO, that can be a chief supply chain officer, chief procurement officer. It requires someone who is really thoughtful about transforming an organization. And as a person who spent most of their career in manufacturing, we don't like to change unless we have to. And we just keep doing things the old way. And so that's why my comment about COVID, I think, is important, because it finally gave permission for companies to try things differently. It gave permission for someone to stand up and say, I bit my tongue for 5 years, and it's time to take on this type of project to try to do things better and to try to at least move in the direction of contextualized data. And so for me, it's COVID, it's all these things. There's a lot of problems, but it ultimately sort of unlocked a little bit of the black box mentality. Those that aren't in supply chain, they just view it as a black box, and you push a button and a product comes out nice and easy. Wouldn't that be wonderful? but that doesn't happen that way. COVID kind of gave us a way to sort of provoke this conversation in mass.
Now, I think when you were looking at, and when you were writing the book and you started to kind of talk about how to transcend this abyss, you looked into kind of what contributes to confident decision making. I just wonder if you could speak a little bit to kind of what you find, both when you were doing your research for the book, but also you talk to folks all the time about their data and what confidence they have in the data.
Yeah. I mean, in the book, I talk a little bit about a multinational manufacturer who realized through data contextualization that separate divisions were buying the same part from the same supplier at 5 different, wildly different prices.
Yeah.
And this is a sort of an extreme example, a real example, to highlight what happens with manufacturers of all of the products that we consume and love. They're buying entities, they're starting plants, they're starting new production, they're moving things from one theater to another. And oftentimes you stand up a general ledger or a financials because the company has to operate. You have to have HR, you have to be able to pay people and have benefits. You have to be able to do demand forecasting, supply planning. You have to give tools to engineers. And then source is in the background. And we're told, just make sure you can create enough product. You have enough parts and ingredients and minerals or metals to be able to deliver our products that we know we're going to sell or we already have ordered.
Yeah.
And we're given Excel to work with. And so this gets lost as the company goes to the next strategic priority. It's trying to grow. It's trying to grow EBITDA. It's trying to grow top line. There's very little cause to focus on the bottom line. And so where I have come at this data gulch problem is from the bottom line. So, it's a lot sexier, if you will, to invest money to grow the top line of a business. Hey, this is going to help our sales. This is going to lift, this is going to market and sell everything we do, and it's going to be great. It's pretty easy to get behind that. But when you tell people you can save 10% on your cost of goods sold, it's not as sexy. And so the data issue post-COVID has really sort of accentuated that need where this is a sexy place because now you can grow your earnings, your profit, even if your top line is flat. And we're living in sort of unique conditions today globally, and not all companies are up and to the right and growing. Some have flattened, and the ones that had better offerings always have a better handle on their bottom line cost cut measure. So I think that's driven a lot of it.
What was interesting for me when I experienced this as a practitioner was that growth is obviously, revenue is good, but the problem is that profitable revenue. And so because of the decision abyss, you would have sales making commitments that were baked into a bill of material, which is then priced in a way that's sold to a customer at a way that's not profitable to manufacture because of what sourcing knows about pricing, for example. And then sourcing are only brought in at the end and said, here's a bill of material, go to town, and by the way, this is our target pricing for all the bill of material. And you look at that and think, well, there's no way that I can source at that level of pricing that you have in the bill of material. That creates a lot of conflict, and you're setting off, you may have got the sales, the revenue growth, but actually it's actually costing you to deliver that versus you've got profitable revenue growth. And ultimately that's the goal, right? Is profitable revenue growth.
Absolutely. I'll also highlight another piece from my book that, for so long, I sit with a lot of CEOs or CFOs or heads of operations and supply chain and procurement. And for so long, the real senior C-suite at companies have felt like supply chain is a black box. And black box syndrome, where you push a button and a product comes out. That's all you need to know. And the encouraging thing that I've seen is with the structure and language of the decision abyss and the underlying data gulch and the human behavior issues that come with that, there's a real willingness for some of these C-suite executives to jump in and actually begin to learn. And I don't want to say old dogs learning new tricks, but as a business leader, you should know more about your supply chain.
Yeah.
You should hold executives accountable for understanding the moving parts of their supply chain, even if at a high level, because this directly impacts that company's health.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing more chief supply chain officers or chief procurement officers ascending to top roles, taking even bigger roles, taking COO, taking CEO roles, because knowledge and intimacy with the supply chain is paramount for a product company, full stop. And so I'm encouraged by what the language and the framework and the decision abyss is trying to do, and try to help people to sort of acknowledge the importance of the work that we do.
Now, we said at the very beginning, you've had a career that's been focused on technology and being in and around technology. And obviously all around us, we see the pace of change and digitization. And I think that supply chain, and my experience again, is kind of from the direct materials procurement supply chain, was that we're a late adopter. Also because, there are so many connections with supply chain and procurement, technology and direct materials with the rest of the business, that there's risk associated with it. So we're a little bit more careful in terms of implementation. That's changing as, we're kind of getting into a world where digitization is something that's more familiar. But I'd love to know how you see that technology and technology advancement can start to help us solve some of the problems that the abyss has created.
Yeah, it's so funny. Decades ago, we just we had Excel, and then along came the concept of like a data lake or a big expanded data multi-source database, and we're living in. If this isn't the golden age of technology and everything that AI and generative AI and agentic AI is doing, I don't know what the golden age. This has got to be it.
This is what we've wished for the last 25 years.
I mean, man, if we could take this technology back in a time machine 20 years ago, imagine. But look, these next generation solutions with AI powering contextualized data and agency are amazing. So, I'm a self-proclaimed data geek, but data is only useful if I can see an insight and I can turn it into an action. Data for data's sake is just kind of not that interesting. So now we're in an era where these autonomous systems not only can ingest data and analyze data, but automate actions and learn from it. So at LevaData, we think about how to connect this siloed information to run what if type scenarios and help teams implement better decisions at speed. If it doesn't end with a different decision, or it doesn't end with a confirmation of a decision, then we failed. Because data for data's sake, with the tools that we have today, it's an incredibly powerful time to have solutions like we have on the market today to actually do our job better in sourcing. So I'm incredibly bullish on all things agentic AI. We do a lot of work with that at LevaData. And I think it is rapidly, the biggest thing I see, Phil, is the workflow pattern from years ago was from software vendor to user. Vendor would tell the user how to think about source to contract, how to think about procure to pay, how to think about sourcing and communication and collaboration with suppliers and contract manufacturers. Those days are now inverted. So now the power resides with the user. I can make my own workflow with a process orchestration tool with a lot of leading tools, and I can take the best in class knowledge parts. I can take everything that I need in this workflow and create my own. So agency unlocks and really puts the power back in the user's hands. And for me, I think all sourcing professionals should run towards this evolution. And we'll be late adopters, but let's not be too late, because the tools are there. The technology is there. Let's change our behavior and our patterns, because we can really make some big leaps forward with the technology that's around today.
One of the things I love that kind of, as you talked about the shifting of, you can now build workflows around how you want rather than be told what your workflow should be, is the ability to do rapid testing and rapid testing in kind of controlled environments. So, I think about the days when it would take 9 months to build a new process, and then you build your technology around your new process, and then you would deploy it, and then you would hope it works, as
Yeah.
opposed to, I'm going to try and very quickly create a process in a controlled environment and test it. And I might even A/B test it. So test one against another. And then I learn very quickly which is going to work in my instance. And then I can deploy that and push it to everything else, to, to a larger environment. And that is very quick and kind of rapid iteration. And that's exciting for me in terms of how we can then build customer journeys, user journeys that feel like they're really targeted to what they need them, rather than trying to push them into a very static process.
Agency unlocks so much. Gone are the days, I started my career with, you would look at a supply chain planning tool for a large manufacturing company, 2.5 years to implement. That included change management and training. I mean, years to do. Now at LevaData, we go live in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
It's just radically changed because we understand data, patterning, constructs better, and the tools are there to help people. And so I still raise my eyebrow when I hear from clients or prospects that we're wrapping up an implementation of somebody's tool, and it's only taken us 1.5 years or a year to do. I just scratch my head with, there is a better way to do business in this rapid, fast moving economy. The software is there. It's changing the human.
What do you say to folks who come and say, I like this idea, I would love to, to have this be my reality, but my data is that bad that, I don't really know where to start?
Yeah, we love people like that, by the way, at LevaData. We really do, because I've heard this from every client and every prospect. We love what you guys do. We believe it will work for us, but you've never seen data as bad as we have.
Yep.
And look, as just a normal person, I say, listen, we got to look at it, but we've seen some awful data, and your data is probably not as bad as you think. We at LevaData have been working with AI for years, and our algorithms and ability to connect patterns and pattern match, I believe, is unrivaled in sourcing and perhaps in all of procurement. We ingest really bad data, we blend it, we contextualize it with all of the insights that we have on every part. So for us, data being bad, it just means that no one has been working with it and has been actively cleaning it and scrubbing it. And that's what we spent years, and I mean years, with algorithms using AI, getting to a point where we can ingest data in hours. And so not in months or years like it used to take. So we've seen bad data. I love seeing, usually it's never as bad as the client thinks, and we can help them, and then they get a level of comfort and they're not embarrassed about it. No one should be embarrassed. Again, I go back to, this is not an embarrassing problem. This is an acknowledgement that we have asymmetric siloed data. It's not one person's fault. It's not one team's fault. It's not one company's fault. Every company experiences this decision of this in some form. And so the goal of the book and the goal of kind of the thesis of LevaData is help move people further on the pendulum toward making better decisions. It's not something, the title is a bit cheeky because you can't really conquer this. It's not something that's
It's an ongoing challenge.
For those, listening, you're not going to buy the book and there are 3 secrets in there, and if you implement them, everything will be great. It's not that way. It's that you can actually be better at it. You can make improvements, and it will serve your company well. It will serve your team well. It will serve your peers well, and you'll make better, more efficient decisions. But it's not something that can be conquered, because it's just a very hard problem to ever really solve.
Can you paint a picture of what, again, don't want to say when you've solved the problem, when you're on top of the problem and you now have, you've kind of overcome the abyss. You've got all the different functional areas that we talked about, kind of in lockstep, being able to make decision on consistent data. Like, what does that look like? And maybe kind of try and make it as real as possible if there's an example or a use case or something like that. Cause I want to show this is what's possible.
Yeah.
It might seem hard from where you are right now, but this is what's possible.
We've been working with a client for 6 years at LevaData, and they came to us because all clients start with us because they want to save money.
Yeah.
We have the largest blended data repository on parts, and so we know what you should pay, and it's usually you should be paying less than you are paying, and we give you negotiating leverage and insights that you can turn into action that you can then go negotiate and save money. So everyone wants to save money. If you ask people, do you want to save some money? They say, yeah, of course. So people come to us to save money. But what happens is once you have contextualized data in sourcing, once you have the ability to ingest new bonds, once you have that ability to ingest demand and understand the rolling forecast, understanding your inventory on hand and what you should buy, once you have a true data picture, you can do anything.
Mhm.
So this company was saving money. They spent a couple of years saving money, and then, they needed to find out the locations of their parts.
Yeah.
And so they used our engine to go pull all their suppliers and get locations of where those parts are coming from. And the timing could not have been better because then 6 months later, tariffs began to be mentioned. And so we at LevaData, we think we were the first in market because we turned it on in like 3 weeks. We had all the information on locations, and we turned on a tariff simulator where you can simulate by country, by supplier, based on the parts that you are buying and based on what you care about. So the sort of rabbit hole of sourcing is that there's always another use case to go solve. And so I don't know what the use case 3 months from now or 6 months from now is, but I know with our data model, you can go have the best informed view that is possible. Another example, I had a chief supply chain officer call me up when the war in Israel broke out. He said, what's my exposure in Israel?
Yeah.
And I literally logged into the system and showed him it's one click away. And here's your exposure. And let's talk about a remediation plan. Is it worth it? Are you buying enough there? Is it worth the hassle? And so what you realize is with data, those are 2 location examples, but data is incredibly powerful when you know how to use it. We have another client, and I talk about in the book, that had, all their parts figured out, and they had one part where the lead time was close to a year, like a 52-week lead time. It just was not acceptable. And without a system with a blended data, contextualized data, you're not able to kind of put together that insight in what action you should go take. So I come back to, I've said it a couple of times, but it's really important because you don't want to just do data for data's sake. It has to change human behavior. It has to make us prompted for action and to take action.
I'm going to wrap up with this last question. As you went on the journey to kind of research and then write the book, was there anything that, was your perspectives or biases going in changed by something that you did, or did you gather additional insights and information that changed your perception of what you thought, the end would look like? I'd love to kind of hear some of how the journey itself helped to continue to develop and evolve your thinking.
Yeah, this, I spoke at a few conferences, I keynoted at a few places talking about this decision of this, and I was really overwhelmed by the response. I was not thinking about a book.
Yeah.
I like to write 500 or 800 word blogs and kind of talk about sourcing.
Not 50,000 words.
No, yeah. And I think the book's about 52,000.
Yeah.
So I was overwhelmed and humbled by how many people told me I have seen this my entire career.
Yeah.
Or I'm just starting and you just described the environment that I live in.
Yeah.
And so this book, the thing I didn't know when I set out to write it is that there would be a wide range. For the old supply chain veteran like myself, I think there's some good stuff in there for people like that. For someone just starting their career, I think there's stuff for someone like, and you don't have to know and be a supply chain or data nerd to enjoy it. There was a lot of stories. It's written without a lot of the complexity. And really with an eye towards how we change human behavior, those of us in sourcing, because I really do think, and I didn't when I set out to write the book, I didn't see this as acutely as having talked to a lot of people now.
Yeah.
But we've normalized the pain, Phil. And
Mhm.
so for me, I feel like my biggest thing is I'm trying to alert C-suite executives to normalize sourcing's pain, to
Yeah.
do something about it,
Yeah.
to use contextualized data to drive better decision making.
Yeah. And it's fixable. It's not
Yes,
something to lament, but it's something that's fixable.
yes, indeed.
Well, the book is called Conquering the Decision Abyss, Turning Data into Action in the Modern Supply Chain. Where can anyone pick up a copy who would like to read a copy?
Yeah, it's available in print and ebook formats on September 9th.
Yeah.
You can get it. It's available for pre-order now at Amazon or
Mhm.
Ingram Sparks. Through major online retailers. And I think anyone who's interested in all things supply chain sourcing or just the psychology of making better business decisions, it'll be a worthwhile read.
Yeah. No, I highly recommend it. And we will put links to I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile in our show notes. So if anyone would like to reach out directly, they have a place to go and do that. But we'll also include links of where you can go and get the book from the publisher, from Amazon itself. Those will all be at artofprocurement.com/podcast. That's artofprocurement.com/podcast, where you'll find today's conversation plus lots of others that we've had. So, Keith, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Phil. Always a pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Take care.